Well, holy smokes, everyone. We are seeing absolutely crazy scenes on what's happening in China right now. If you've been living under a rock and you don't know what's been happening, well, over the past week, we've seen some absolutely spectacular scenes. What started, this has all been boiling. This has been going on for a while now, but today it has just hit a tipping point. So what's happened is about a week ago, we saw huge protests at Foxconn with employees protesting about the conditions at Foxconn. They weren't getting paid, they weren't getting the food they need, and they were forced to live with people that already had COVID. And so they were saying this is enough. They're being treated very poorly. And I'll show you some footage while I talk about this. They've been clashing with officials. They've been clashing with security. We've seen people actually fleeing Foxconn. They've been walking for miles and miles and miles just to get home. So they had enough. And again, they weren't getting paid. They weren't getting compensated. Apple's spoken on this, and they said they're trying to sort out and deal with what the issues is going on there. But that was just the first domino to fall. Then what we saw happen more recently was there was recently a fire in China where 10 people sadly lost their lives because the firefighters couldn't get there soon enough. Now, there's been a lot of speculation whether it was because of these COVID measures that has caused this. Of course, the officials have denied it, but many residents are saying, no, it is the COVID zero policy and the measures that blocked the firefighters who began to get access to this building that has caused this tragedy. Now, since then, we've seen huge unrest erupt through China. Now, this is very rare scenes, people, and many people comparing this moment to Tiananmen Square. So this is going to have huge consequences for China's economy. We've already got the news. The markets have opened in Asia with China and also Hong Kong. Their stock market is crashing right now. So let's get into this news about how people are even now calling for Xi to step down, and they're calling for huge change, and they're calling for basically a revolution for the China Communist Party. China COVID unrest boils over as citizens defy lockdown efforts. The protests against China's restrictions spread across China on Sunday as citizens took to the streets and university campuses venting their anger and frustration on local officials and the Communist Party. There was heavy police presence in some areas where huge crowds gathered in Shanghai after protests at one of the locations on Saturday called for President Xi Jinping to step down, a level of national dissent unheard of since he took power a decade ago. So that's right, everyone. This is huge for actually people to call for Xi Jinping to step down, and they're putting themselves at huge risk because many of them will face jail for this or even worse. Demonstrations were also reported in the capital Beijing, the original COVID epicenter of Wuhan, and Jiangxing, the trigger for the dissent after virus restrictions were blamed for hampering rescue efforts in a deadly fire on Thursday. A video on social media of a woman screaming in the burning high-rise apartment blockade, capital of the far western Xinjiang region, frightened people across China who have been facing rolling quarantines and lockdowns that can cause their apartment blocks to be closed off or blocked by steel gates. That's right, everyone. These lockdowns in China are not like the lockdowns we face here in the West. While we thought they were bad, what's been happening because they don't have the manpower to patrol or to police or force people to stay in their homes, so some people have actually had their doors welded shut. This is completely crazy, and these are completely draconian measures, and that's why we all have to stand up for freedom in our own countries and not give up our freedoms that we've worked so hard for, that our fathers have died for, and our grandfathers, but is now slowly, very carefully and very cunningly being taken away. Within hours, protests had spread online and restrictions of compounds in Beijing and other cities were filmed since Friday, confronting local officials who were trying to install the infamous iron guard gates to isolate their communities. The protests quoted the new 20-point rules introduced this month that were designed to try to make China's COVID zero policy less restrictive for people and less damaging to the economy. At least 10 people were reported to have died in the Urumqi fire, and citizens question whether the prolonged lockdown delayed attempts to save them. In a press briefing late Friday, city officials apologized to the public and expressed condolences to victims of the fire, but denied claims that the residents couldn't evacuate because of COVID measures. But of course, the people weren't buying that at all, and that's what's led to this huge unrest. On Saturday, crowds in Shanghai gathered in Urumqi Middle Road, a street named after Urumqi. Hundreds of residents convened near midnight at the intersection to mourn the dead. The lighting candles and holding white papers, a symbolic protest against censorship in silence, videos circulate on social networks showed. They then called for easing of COVID controls and the end of lockdown in Xinjiang. Demonstrators returned to the site on Sunday despite the heavy police presence. Again, people, these scenes was a match that triggered this unrest. Hundreds of protesters also gathered in central Beijing by the Yangtze River late Sunday. They held up pieces of white paper and chanted slogans including, "We don't want COVID tests, we want to eat." And that's another thing. These people have been locked in their homes. They haven't had food to eat, water. They haven't been getting the right medical care. So is it really about health measures, or is it more about control? I think you can say that this is the most confrontational street event since Tiananmen, based on viewing the video footage of the Shanghai protest. Collection of secret documents related to the 1989 military crackdown and protests in Beijing. These protests clearly have dozens, maybe hundreds of people behind them, at least based on video clips that I saw, and there is connection among the citizens. While China's government hasn't publicly responded to the growing unrest, the People's Daily, the Communist Party's mouthpiece, ran a front-page story Sunday rooting the need to stick to the COVID zero, which is said is in line with the party's nature and principles. One video on Saturday, Shanghai street protest has been widely circulated. People are seen chanting, "We want freedom, we want human rights," sang the national anthem, and "Do You Hear the People Sing" from the musical Less Miserable, while observers posted and live streamed videos and photos in China's social networks and Twitter and Instagram. And the video shows a rare moment of defiance against the nation's leader, with the crowd calling for Xi and the Chinese Communist Party leaders to resign. "CCP," shouted a man in the crowd. "Step down," the crowd chanted in response. "Xi Jinping," the man shouted again. "Step down," the crowd echoed. After hour-long protests, police began to disperse the crowd more forcefully, and posts on social networks said a few of the protests were getting arrested early Sunday. So again, this is the people saying enough is enough, and they want an end to COVID zero right now. Images and video of the internet showed that protests were widespread across the country, with physical gatherings from groups of residents to street demonstrations of hundreds, while the government's army of censors were kept busy by removing a constant stream of online criticism. And this is why we can't allow censorship in the West by these tech giants like Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, and YouTube. We must allow free speech. Otherwise, we're going to see censorship of protests in our countries like the US, the West, Canada, UK, etc. Residents from Langzhou in northwestern China were shown protesting on the street on Saturday night, with videos showing some residents in so-called high-risk area tearing down a blockade to escape isolation, while others were shown overturning kiosks and tents set up for COVID tests. Students in colleges around the nation added to the wave of anger. In Nanjing's Communication University of China, hundreds gathered on Saturday holding up illuminated phones like candles around a young man who lamented the fire in his hometown. "I speak for those who lost family and friends in the fire," he said, as a crowd cheered and applauded. A video showed some holding up blank white pieces of paper and chanting slogans such as "Long live the people" and "Rest in peace." But the college officials are now turning on the students. College staff criticized the students and attempted to persuade them to disperse. "One day you'll pay the price for what you did today," a man said to students over a loudspeaker. "You will too," shouted the crowd. So that's right, everyone. What we have to remember is we're the 99%. We highly outnumber the global elite, and they're terrified of us being united, and that's why they're constantly trying to get us divided. Other colleges saw similar events, with students posting leaflets, singing songs, and painting graffiti with slogans such as "Give me liberty" or "Give me death," according to social media posts, which most have been quickly blocked. But of course, many people are worried now that the government may respond like they did in 1989 in Tiananmen Square, and there's going to be a huge crackdown coming for these protests. The widespread dissent has raised concern that the government may respond with a crackdown to strike for the protest. Now again, as I'm recording this, Hong Kong stocks fall over 3% in Asia markets amid unrest in China over COVID restrictions. So people, this is a huge moment in China. We're seeing the unemployment rate for the youth in China is skyrocketing. We're seeing the movement called "Lie Flat" or "Let It Rot," where youth are unwilling to participate in an unfair system and they're not wanting to work at all. We're seeing the real estate sector in China crashing. Again, their stock market is crashing. We're seeing bank runs in China. And now that they were the factory of the world, while companies like Apple may start pulling some of their manufacturing out of China, and this is going to cause China's economy to crash, but it will also cause significant inflation as companies have to find other alternatives overseas or bringing their manufacturing onshore. But everyone, this is another great reminder why we have to fight so hard to keep our freedoms, because if we lose them, if we let this great reset happen, we will be facing the same thing that these Chinese people are facing right now. But everyone, what do you think about this? Sorry, I've been sick the past couple of days. Sorry, the energy wasn't that high. I've been struggling with a cold, but hopefully I'll get better soon and get back to uploading much more content. Now, for all my loyal viewers and subscribers still watching, you're awesome. Thanks for watching. I'll see you all in the next video.